Jesus may have died, but that wasn't the end of things. God was not done. The story is not over. God was working. In fact, in the creeds, we confess that Jesus descended into hell, that God stormed the gates of hell, that place of abandonment, of loneliness, of despair, and conquered it and came back. As you see, 3 days later, after Jesus had died, some women, Mary Magdalene and Salome, went to the tomb. They took spices and perfumes. Remember that myrrh that was given to the baby Jesus? Things like that. They took him to the tomb so that they could anoint the body of Jesus. This was a ritual in the Jewish tradition in order to honor those who had died. And as they were going along the way, they wondered how they would get in there, who would roll away the stone, for it was so heavy. But when they got there, the stone was already rolled away. The guards were gone. The tomb was empty. Immediately, they ran back to the other disciples, and Peter and John, they came running. They ran all the way to the tomb, and John got there first, then Peter followed him, and Peter went right inside and found the burial cloths rolled up nice and neat in the place where Jesus had been laying. Now they were not sure what was going on, and so they left, went back to tell everyone else what had happened. But Mary, she hung around, trying to make sense of life. And as she was standing there, she saw a man approach. Her head bowed, didn't really even look him in the face. She presumed him to be the gardener, and she said, "Please tell me where you've taken my Lord, so that I can take care of his body, so that I can honor him." But this was no gardener, it was Jesus. And he said, "Mary." He said her name. And all of a sudden, Mary came to life again. She knew that voice. She knew what it was like when Jesus called her by name. God knew her, and she knew him. Mary came to life, and she said, "Rabbi, I'm so glad to see you." And she and the other women went back and told the other disciples, but they thought it was an idle tale, that they were seeing things or hoping for things. A little later on, Jesus appeared to some other disciples who had already left Jerusalem. They were on the road to the city of Emmaus. They were going back home. And Jesus began walking with them. Now, oddly enough, they didn't recognize Jesus, because who expects someone who has died to appear on the road to them? And they were just so overcome by their grief and their sadness, and Jesus started them asking questions about this. And they said, "Are you the only person who doesn't understand what's going on?" And Jesus said, "I'm not sure you understand what's going on." And Jesus proceeded to open up the scriptures to them about all the places and the prophets that had foretold about the Messiah and what he would do, that he would not be a warrior to conquer nations. He would not be someone to put down bad people, but who would give himself to save them. Jesus told them many of the stories that I have told you about how God has always been faithful, about God's abiding, saving work throughout all of human history, and then why the Messiah had to die in the way that he did. When they got to Emmaus, they invited Jesus to spend some more time with him, because they were processing and opening, and they were beginning to understand it and gain some hope again. And as they had this meal, Jesus broke the bread, and suddenly their eyes were opened, and they recognized Jesus. Just like that, he was gone. Now, they didn't wait to finish their meal. They headed back to Jerusalem to tell everybody else, where all of them were in a locked room for fear. They were afraid of the authorities. They were afraid of what are we going to do next? What do you do when you invested 3 years of your life into someone who just dies? Someone who promises so many things and then seems to fail you. In the midst of this fear, in the midst of this depression and despair, Jesus appeared to them in that locked room. And he said, "Do not be afraid." I said, "Peace be with you." And then he breathed on them the Holy Spirit. And they took that very breath of God into themselves again. Like all the way back in creation when God breathed into Adam, like back at Ezekiel in the valley of dry bones, that breath of God entered them, and again they became alive and had hope.